I'm going to go ahead and start doing Job for our Wednesday night class, just to be able to continue on, and that it won't, we won't get so far behind. It's a long book anyway, so I am just wanting to make sure that we continue our progress. So where we left off was in Job chapter 21 and verse 8. Job 21 and verse 8. And if you'll recall, Job is answering right now, and up to that point, we can read through it. It says this, "But Job answered and said, Hear diligently my speech, and let this be your consolations. Suffer me that I may speak, and after that I have spoken, mock on. As for me, is my complaint to man? And if it were so, why should not my spirit be troubled? Mark me, and be astonished, and lay your hand upon your mouth. Even when I remember, I am afraid, and trembling taketh hold on my flesh. Wherefore do the wicked live, become old, yea, are mighty in power? Their seed," and this is verse 8, "their seed is established in their sight with them, and their offspring before their eyes." And so the wicked are going to live on, and that's the idea. Of course, Job's friends continuously say, and of course this is kind of one of those, we're just repeating certain things, but we have to keep things in the context, and that's why we have to keep repeating things. But Job's friends, they say, well, you know what, you've sinned, and because you've sinned, that's why you're in this predicament as it is. And yet, of course, Job knows that he's done no wrong. He doesn't know of anything that he's done. And, of course, we know the backstory. None of these people knew the backstory. The backstory, of course, is that Satan has jumped in and done this, and has done so only because God had allowed it. And so the wicked, of course, the idea that Job's friends have is that the wicked, when they do something wrong, obviously they're going to suffer punishment for that. But they thought that would happen right then and there. It would happen in this world. And Job is laying forth a case at this point saying, well, that's not necessarily the case. Matter of fact, there are a lot of people that are wicked, and they continue to do well, and they live on. It says their seed is established in their sight with them. So they have children, and they have grandchildren, and they are wicked, but they are still blessed. And that is kind of a predicament for his friends, because they still very vehemently believe that the idea is, hey, if you're wicked, God's going to punish you, and he's not going to let you go on. And so anybody that has wealth and they lose it, they must have done something wrong, and that would be the implication in Job's case. And of course, they state it right as a matter of fact. They just state it right out. Verse 9, "Their houses are safe from fear, neither is the rod of God upon them." It says, look, you know what? They feel comfortable. They feel safe. They're not worried about what is going on in this life. They don't worry about the rod of God being upon them. They don't think that God is going to strike them down right then. They're going to continue to live their wicked ways. Verse 10, "Their bull gendereth and faileth not, their cow calveth and casteth not her calf." So the wicked, you say the wicked die, and they die young, and they don't succeed. But that's not what Job sees. Job sees that not only are they doing okay, they're not afraid of God smiting them at that very moment, but also they see that, the fact of the matter is that their livestock does well. They give birth, and they have cattle, and what they're doing is successful. And so Job is, of course, laying out this argument that haven't you ever met someone wicked that was doing wrong, and yet they're progressing. They're in sin, but yet it looks like they have all these blessings from God. Verse 11 says, "They send forth their little ones like a flock, and their children dance. They take up the timbrel and harp and rejoice at the sound of the organ. They spend their days in wealth, and in a moment go down to the grave." And so, between now and their death, they are having a good time. They're living high on the hog. They're doing great. Everything is wonderful for them. Everything is going well. It's kind of like that, the old, uh, you know, myth, with King Midas. Everything turns to gold. Everything that they touch is just, it turns to gold. Everything is wonderful. Now, of course, Job is not defending the wicked. He's making the case that, the wicked are succeeding, and it's not because they're being righteous. It's very much the case that wickedness actually can succeed, and not in the next life, but in this life. I mean, how many times do people lie, cheat, and steal their way to the top, and they end up being successful at that, and yet no, they never get caught? That probably happens quite a bit. We only hear about the times where people do get caught. And that's how we know that it happens. We know that it happens because we see the stories on the news when people get caught. But Job isn't defending the wicked here, but he is saying, look, they do prosper. They prosper. And we know that that is the case. We know that. We've seen that in our own lives. I mean, how many people who are atheists today are rich beyond belief? And there's plenty of those. We know that what Job's friends are saying is just not right. And Job is trying to lay forth the logic so that they can understand that as well. Verse 14, it says, "Therefore they say unto God, Depart from us, for we desire not the knowledge of thy ways." And so the wicked say to God, "Leave me alone. I don't want any part of you. I don't want to be a part of any sort of religion. I don't care for God. God is not going to be a part of our lives. We're just going to do our own thing." And it says, "For we desire not the knowledge." They don't want to know God. And you think back, I think, to the Exodus. You think about Pharaoh. Pharaoh was in this very position. Remember what he said to Moses? And he says, basically, does God know who I am? Who is this God? Furthermore, does he know who I am? I'm the Pharaoh. And so of course he thought he was God in and of itself. But Job is saying, look, here it is. There are people that are wicked and they prosper. Verse 15, "What is the Almighty that we should serve him, and what profit should we have if we pray unto him?" And so there's still this discourse about people who don't want to have God in their knowledge. They don't want to know God. Going again. Who is the Lord, and why should I obey his voice? Exodus 5 and verse 2. Many people have taken that attitude of Pharaoh. They think, well, I don't need God. God is not something that is going to be on my mind. I don't worry about that. I don't need to care about anything because I'm not worried about God. I'm not worried about the coming judgment. I'm not worried about those things because I don't believe those things exist. I don't care about God. That is what is being said by Job. That he's saying, these people say, and they say, what profit is it if we pray? We're just wasting our time. And there are so many people out there that believe that same thing. I mean, right now, we're separated because of the virus going around. But otherwise, we would be here and be together, and that would be not only Wednesday nights, but it would also be on Sunday mornings and things like that. And so, there are people that don't believe in God, and they look at us as if we're wasting our time doing this. But of course, we know we're not wasting our time. God is real. God is going to answer our prayer, and so we know that we should take our time and really listen to the words of God. Verse 16, "Lo, their good is not in their hand, and counsel of the wicked is far from me." And so, here he is. I thought you said the wicked suffer, and lose their lives early. Job is struggling, and he hasn't done anything wrong. He's trying to show him, hey, look, don't you see that the wicked, that they're not in the same shoes that we're in? Sometimes I'll say this. I got to be careful because sometimes I think I may have said this improperly, but it is one of the hardest lives to live is the life of a Christian. And the reason for that is that there are things that we're going to have to go through that other people aren't going to have to go through. We're going to have to take a stand when other people would say, just keep your mouth shut. I mean, for the very fact of the matter that there is religious division in this world based off the Scriptures, and we have to make sure that we're teaching the truth, it could be very easy for us to go on and say, you know what, we don't need to offend anybody. I like having friends. I like being able to just talk to anybody about the Bible. So I'm going to talk about the common things. I'm not going to talk about the truth. I'm not going to get into anything that's going to cause controversy. I don't want to do that because, really it'd be uncomfortable. Or you might think, well, I don't want to go and talk to my friends about the Bible because I'm afraid of what they're going to say. I'm afraid that they're going to reject me. And that's not really the attitude that we should have, of course. We need to have an attitude that we want to go out and talk to others because, of course, Matthew 28:18 through 20 has shown us that that's what we ought to do. We ought to go out and to teach people and baptize them into Christ and teach them to go and teach people and baptize. And so that is true. We need to do those things. But if we take this attitude of, well, we don't really need to do this, or I'm uncomfortable because this is not the most comfortable thing for me to do. I'm not a very extroverted person or something, and make up all sorts of excuses. But the fact of the matter is that while those things are hard, they're necessary. And we might have to take stand at work. We might have to say, look, I'm not going to go and have a meeting at the bar while everybody's having drinks. I'm not going to do that. I'm a Christian. You might even have to decide. I knew of a young man that he was up for Homecoming King, and they would present this award at the homecoming dance. And he ended up saying, look, you can give that to somebody else because I'm not going to go to the dance. I'm a Christian, and that's not right, and so I won't be there. So you can give me that award, but I'm not going to be there to accept it. And so I'm sure that was very, very difficult. I'm sure that people would have thought that oh no, you just bend to the will of society and don't worry about that. Just do what you want to do here. Go and accept your award. That might have been something that people had said, but he stood firm. And I understood that later on, instead of having the homecoming dance, they had a homecoming banquet instead, just so that he could go and receive this homecoming king award. And so I say all that to say this: it is hard sometimes being a Christian. It's hard a lot of times because we have to stand up for what is right and do what is right, even in the face of death. That's what we're to do. That's not something that is easily done for everyone, right? And here it is, Job is suffering through these things. Job is struggling, and he's trying to tell his friends, look, it's not the wicked that are suffering here. It's the righteous that are suffering because, we don't have the avenues, of course, that the wicked do. And you go back through some of the examples that we said, hey, if you are a part of the world, does it matter if you go and meet in the bar for your meeting? No, it doesn't. It doesn't matter if you go to the homecoming dance. No, it doesn't matter. None of that stuff matters because there's no principle to keep you from it. But, of course, if you are following God, that makes a little extra difficulty there because there are principles that keep you from doing certain things that the world would find normal. The world would find it okay. And we have to be set apart. We need to be sanctified. And in order to keep that thought, we need to separate ourselves from the things that the world does. Verse 17, how oft is the candle of the wicked put out? And how oft cometh their destruction upon them? God distributeth sorrows in his anger. So, how often is the candle of the wicked put out? We could go through the Bible and mention several times where God allowed for the wicked to suffer physically in this world. But we know that even if they don't suffer physically in this world, what's going to happen? In the end, everything's going to work out because God will have the judgment upon all. And if we have obeyed his commands, then that's fine. We're going to go and we're going to be with him. But if we have not obeyed, then it's looking bad. It's not good. and the wicked are going to be punished because of those things. Verse 18, they are as stubble before the wind, and as chaff that the storm carrieth away. That one reminds me of something. If you go back to Psalm chapter 1, I love this psalm. It's one of my favorites, but it says, Blessed is the man that walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor standeth in the way of sinners, nor sitteth in the seat of the scornful. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and in his law doth he meditate day and night. And then it talks about him as illustration that he's like a tree planted by the rivers of water, and everything he's going to do is going to prosper. He's going to have all that he needs. As far as the tree was concerned, the leaf wasn't going to wither. It was going to bring forth its fruit in its season. Everything was going to be fine. But then you look at verse 4, and it says, the wicked are not so, the unrighteous are not so, but they are like the chaff which the wind driveth away. And when you think about chaff is that little, it's basically it's trash. It's stamped out, and in the process of the winnowing process, you go through and you take all that chaff, and what do? It's stamped out on the threshing floor, and then they take a winnowing fan, they wave it over that chaff, and then that chaff is lightweight, and like I said, it's just trash. It's not good for anything. And so it lifts up and it blows away with the wind. And nobody's there mourning the chaff. I wish we had that chaff. No, they're not mourning the chaff. They're thankful for the wheat, and they don't care about the chaff because the chaff is trash. But verse 19 says, God layeth up his iniquity for his children. He rewardeth him, and he shall know it. His eyes shall see his destruction. He shall drink of the wrath of the Almighty. So when is justice going to be done? That's kind of the question at hand. When the wicked suffer just like the righteous, that's going to be in the end, because it's not all going to happen in this world. Because if you go over to Matthew chapter 5, you find out that the rain falls on the just and on the unjust, and so it's not that we have some sort of special status in life that God is going to protect us on all sides. That's not the case. I mean, there have been times when God did that. I mean, if you think about the wilderness wanderings in Exodus, that definitely happened. They had clothes and shoes that would not wear out. If they would obey God, the women, they would not have any miscarriages, and there's all sorts of things we go through, and not to mention the fact that the miracle of giving them food every day in a deserted place and water, and how much they would need of all those things. And so, God provided for them, but in these days we don't have that specifically, and so here it is. The wicked, they're gonna suffer just as well as the righteous will, and really we're looking at is in the last day. In the last day, that's going to happen at the judgment. That's when we're going to see all this really come together. Verse 21: For what pleasure hath he in his house after him, when the number of his months is cut off in the midst? Shall any teach God knowledge, seeing he judgeth those that are high? And so, are we going to challenge God here? Job does not question the fact that the wicked are going to suffer or are going to be judged, and that they're going to be separated from God forever. He doesn't question that, but he has a problem with them saying the wicked die young and the righteous live on and on, because he's lived righteously, and at this point he's dying. Verse 23: One dieth in his full strength, being wholly at ease and quiet. His breasts are full of milk, and those in his bones are moistened with marrow. And another dieth in the bitterness of his soul, and never eateth with pleasure. They shall lie down alike in the dust, and the worms shall cover them. And so here it is. Job is referencing this once again. He's already done this a little bit, but he's come back, and he's talking about death, and he's saying, death is the great equalizer of them all, because it doesn't matter how righteous you are. or how wicked you are, pretty much everyone's going to die. I mean, there have been only a couple of occasions where people have not died, and as far as or stayed dead and have been raised from the dead, and there's been only a handful of those happenings, really, in the Scriptures. But when you think about it, at some point, everybody's supposed to die. Everybody's going to die. And so Job's saying that is the great equalizer. When is it that the righteous and the wicked are going to be about the same? Well, it's at death. It's at death because, everybody is going to die one day. Our bodies are going to return to the dust. And there's not going to be any more distinction between us when we're all dust, right? Verse 27, Behold, I know your thoughts, and the devices which you wrongfully imagine against me. And so this is, he's saying, look, I understand what's motivating you. I see where you're coming from here. I know what's going on in your head. Verse 28, For you say, Where is the house of the prince? And where are the dwelling places of the wicked? The idea is they come upon Job, and what did they see? Job is just, he's down and out. We even see him sitting on the ground in ashes and scraping himself with potsherds. But here it is. You look at this, the wicked, are they're not being punished at the same time as the righteous, as far as his friends are concerned. The idea again is the house of the prince. How is he doing? Where are the dwelling places of the wicked? Is the prince the righteous one, and the wicked people? Are they just sitting in trash piles? Not necessarily. That's the biggest misconception here, is that, and we still have this misconception today. People oftentimes think that, well, you know what, if I do this, then the Lord is going to bless me. And I've heard that so many times. There's a little joke that we say sometimes, and I guess really I say it whenever I'm with the family, and I get a front parking spot at some shopping center, and especially if I get multiple, first spot shopping at the mall or whatever, and you get the first spot here, and you go to another place and you get the first spot there, and I'll jokingly say to my wife, well, I guess I must be living right, but that's not the case. It's not. I am doing some meritorious works that are giving me blessings on this earth. While I might be blessed on this earth, I don't. It's not an absolute necessity. It's not an absolute at all that I am blessed because I have done this, that, or the other. And so the righteous, they're not going to have the palaces necessarily. It's amazing to me that this is even a thought, because we don't have to go very far in Scripture to see that kings are pretty corrupt at times. Even David, David, a man after God's own heart, somebody who was very penitent for what he'd done, he used his power as king, to lure a woman and to kill her husband, and this is a terrible thing. But that happened even to somebody who we would have thought more to be righteous. But yes, there are times when the righteous do prosper, but there are a lot of times when the wicked prosper, and so it's not up to us. It's just kind of up to the luck of the draw there. Let's see here. Verse 29. Have you not asked them to go by the way? And do you not know their tokens? That the wicked is reserved to the day of destruction. They shall be brought forth to the day of wrath. And so, again, Job is saying, hey, look, the wicked a lot of times do prosper, but in the end, they're not going to prosper. And I can't help but think back to Psalm 1, and when you look at verses 5 and 6, it says that the wicked shall not be able to stand in the judgment. They're not going to be able to stand in the congregation of the righteous. And so it's very much the case that, yes, we're all going to be judged, but the wicked should be afraid of that. It's hilarious to me how many people will say, the thought, "Don't judge me," "Don't judge me," and only God can judge. Well, of course, we could go through and show how that's not true. But when they say only God can judge, yeah, you should be afraid of that. You shouldn't be concerned about what I'm saying. You should be afraid that God is judging you. But yet they're not afraid. And here it is. Job is even saying this. Look, the wicked, in the end, they're not going to be able to live. They're going to be judged. That great day of wrath, the day of judgment is coming, and they are not going to be able to withstand that. It's going to happen. It's going to happen for all of us, but it's definitely going to be very, very bad for them. Verse 31, "Who shall declare his way to his face, and who shall repay him what he hath done?" The wicked, they live long lives, and are not exposed, and those that aren't exposed in their wickedness, they are going to be, they're going to have a funeral one day, and they're going to have to stand before God after that funeral, and on that day of judgment, when that day comes, and they're going to have to answer for the things that they've done. Verse 32, "Yet shall he be brought to the grave, and shall remain in the tomb." Verse 33, "The clods of the valley shall be sweet unto him, and every man shall draw after him, as they are innumerable before him." Here it is. "Ye shall be brought to the grave, and shall remain in the tomb." It's gonna be kept watch. Matter of fact, New King James Version says, "and a vigil kept over the tomb." American Standard says that it's going to have a watch kept over it. And so the idea is that soldiers are going to be guarding their tomb. In verse 33, we saw, "The clods of the valley shall be sweet unto him." It's talking about this the flattery that people give whenever whenever a person dies. I know that you've been there the same way that I've seen this. And one thing I've mentioned before, as far as teaching and preaching is concerned, that I literally, one time I went to a funeral, and I knew the person very well, and I was glad I had someone had thought to ask me to do the funeral, and they said something, and then there was another person that jumped in and said, "Oh, no, we already asked so-and-so." And I was so happy, because it was going to be a difficult thing to get up and say things, because I knew this man fairly well, and he was a pretty mean person, and said really mean things a lot, and did some pretty mean things throughout his life, and just was a very cold person. And when he died, who he was. Oh man, he was a saint. He had lived his life righteously all the way through it up to the bitter end. He was so strong. Sorry about that. He was so strong, and all right. So if you just called, you know that I just hung up on you because I'm recording this. Sorry, but anyway, the whole point of that is very simply, here it is that this man had died, and everybody was saying all these good things, but yet he had not lived the life that they had mentioned. They pulled out very specific things, and had said, "Oh, he had done so much good. He came over, and one time he gave me money because he knew that I was doing something, for the Lord, and he wanted to be a part of it, and no doubt that he had done that thing, but those were isolated events in this man's life of being really just a mean person. I don't know how to say it. I was so shocked that during this lesson, when they first started going on, of course I'm sitting around people that I know, and I go in, I start listening to this, and I start looking around, going, "Am I in the right room? This is surely not the same person." But that's what happens when people die. People tend to think about them in the best light, and maybe it is that psychologically we want to do that. We want to think good of a person, and of course, I would never want to get up at someone's funeral and say, "Well, this person, they're just a horrible person, and man, the world's a better place now that they're dead." God forbid anybody does that, but I tell you what, it's interesting that when people die, it doesn't matter, if they died because they, had died doing something sinful. It ends up that a person is glorified after their death for some reason. And it says, "Every man shall draw after him." They're gonna follow him, and they're gonna say, "Oh man, look at how good this person was. Everybody live your lives just like this person did." And now here Job is sitting here, and he's not doing well, and then he's saying, "Look, I'm suffering. I'm hurting here, and you're saying that I've done wrong. I haven't done wrong. And if you think about the wicked, this is what happens with the wicked. Haven't you seen that?" And yet they're not following this idea with them. They're not thinking about, because they're not following Job. They're not treating him the same way that they would probably one of these wicked people. Verse 34, "How then comfort ye me in vain, seeing in your answers there remaineth falsehood?" So they are being dishonest about Job because they have malice in their hearts. Something is going on with them, and they of course they pretty well at this point they hate Job because he is not going along with what they are saying. All right, so that is the end of this class. I hope that you gain something from it. Once we all get back together, we are going to go ahead and have all the notes that we print out just like normal, and hopefully that will be sooner rather than later. And so I hope that you're staying safe throughout all this, and that everything is going well. And I hope that you enjoyed a little bit of normalcy of getting back to the book of Job.